Hello, everyone. Today, we're really lucky to have Rune. He is a big data Python backend freelance consultant, and he is also a Python content creator. He has a YouTube channel where he teaches people how to learn programming from scratch using Python. And he has 5,000 followers on Twitter. And it's really great to have you on here to have this unique perspective.
Thank you so much. And yeah, that's really good presentation. And I also have this webpage where I have these online courses for free on YouTube. It's actually full courses, and I have some on Udemy as well. Yeah. But other than that, my main focus is being a freelance consultant right now.
That's awesome. So that website is learnpythonwithrune.org.
Yeah, exactly. I have a bit fun with my name because it's a Danish name. I come from Denmark, the Nordic countries. And so in the videos, you also hear me all the time. I pronounce it in Danish because nobody can pronounce it really except Danes. So it's called Rune in Danish. And it's a really deep R. Yeah, Rune.
Rune.
Yeah, exactly. So every time I introduce myself to people in real life, I'm all like, I'm Rune. And people are like, how did you say that?
Well, it's great to have you on the show, Rune.
Yeah. Almost there.
Oh, gosh. I'll get it eventually. Hopefully by the end of this recording.
Yeah, perfect.
So yeah, why don't you give me a little bit of a background? What specifically do you consult in when it comes to big data?
Yeah. So for many years, I've been working with big data, and I've been working with it from different angles. I actually also been a manager, but right now I realized it's more funny to sit programming than being a manager, because that's where the fun is. So what I'm doing now is programming big data backend with Python, because Python became so amazingly powerful. So you can do all these things without the compromise of being a high-level language, actually. So what is this I do? It is I provide a platform, or we build a platform where you can put a lot of data in from different sources and make it available in a more systematic way so people can use them in their analysis. So I actually work with a lot of people that are data scientists and all that kind of stuff. These are the users of the system that I built. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, let's say someone is into AI, you would be building the part that's storing all of the data that they're processing.
Yeah. So often data comes from a lot of different sources, and there's something called data quality. That means that sometimes the data is not perfect, right? So sometimes you need to pour away or sort away a lot of inconsistent data and data discrepancies from the data sets. And also sometimes you need to make some simple transformations so it fits more from various sources, right? So when you work on big data, you want to work from a lot of different sources, and you want like the main thing to be done. So often the simple pipeline is we collect data from different sources, we put it into our data storage, and then we make some simple transformation and make it available through some generic API so they can get the data in a more generic way. So it's like transforming it in a perfect way. So that's like the thing. The big challenge is not to create these pipelines. Most people would be able to make one pipeline, but the big challenge is to make something that scales, that is when it's massive data amounts, right? And yeah, perfect. Makes sense?
Yeah, because sometimes you have to have like, for example, if you're doing I don't know, kind of like what Google did, where they were, or like where Tesla, they have all this data that they're mapping every single day for the AI, and they're connecting, all the driving data, constantly as people are driving their Teslas. So, for example, that's a massive amount of data, because it's like basically learning from every single Tesla on the road and collecting all of that data. So that's it's not a simple thing to take in all of that data, is it?
No. So that is the challenge, right? So for instance, we might be starting a new thing. It's for this company I work for. It's like they want all the data for all the ships around in Denmark. So they're sending metadata around about the circumstances, all kind of metrics from the ships, every single second, and you get that from all the ships around there, right? It's just like Tesla cars there, right? So in this case, just ships, but yeah, you need to handle that kind of massive data amounts, and you need to be able. I mean, the challenges are often. Think of it more like when you have big data and it comes in so fast in such big amounts, like an enormous highway. You probably tried this, right? Then one tiny thing goes wrong, right? One car crashes. What happens on the highway, right?
There's a pile up.
Everybody gets gridlocked and everybody's getting late to work, right? Just because one single car. And it's kind of the same thing working with the big data. If one tiny thing goes wrong, you get enormous backlogs, enormous delays, and it can be quite impossible to catch up to the data again. It's kind of the same problems.
But what's the difference between working with big data versus any other type of data? Like, I mean, don't you always have that issue of pileups if like programming goes wrong or something like that?
Yeah, you could say that, but it is first a problem when you really have massive scale of data, because when you use that, you use a lot of resources. It's a lot about optimizing the way you represent data, for instance. Maybe you don't think about it. Normally, you might just be using, I don't know if you're familiar with pandas data frames, for instance. You'll be using them, but you will do your data processing in that, playing around with data in that. But if you have enormous amount of data, just optimizing the space data takes, it is also, making your resources, you need to optimize your resources to have the minimal footprint of a memory and a CPU usage and all that kind of stuff, right? Because tiny changes that makes enormous impact. Also, when you are in this distributed world where you use online storages and stuff like that, optimizing read and writes, it's also very costly. You don't think about it, but if you do a few read and writes for your small process, it's like nothing. But if you scale it up with millions again, right, then suddenly the cost of it becomes enormous, right? So there are a lot of things you don't think about when you do small systems, but in big systems, tiny differences can make enormous impact of the cost.
Oh, I see. So one, it comes to the physical limitations of the hardware, just making sure that it can handle it without crashing. And the second one is how do you scale it so that it doesn't cost you a fortune as well?
Exactly. So you kind of have these images, Docker images, where you run things in, right? You need to optimize them to fill the least amount, right? So if you run them and you like take, for instance, 20 giga of RAM for each container, then you can see that doesn't really scale if you have hundreds or millions of these containers, right? So you need to optimize them to have the smallest amount of memory usage, because if you can scale it down to, let's say, 4 gigabyte of RAM, right? Then you can actually have like how many, almost 5 times as many of them running in the same memory, right? And you pay for these resources, right? When you process online. Or if you even if you do it on-prem, right, you do have limited number of resources. So so that's kind of one of the magic things in big data. It is like you need to optimize everything to scale at large within the budgets.
Oh wow! And how did you get into this space?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Kind of. Sometimes you get a job and it's like a freakish coincidence. You just end up in big data systems, and and when you get expert in building backend big data and you like it, it's like The funny thing is that area evolves so fast. So what I was doing 5-10 years ago is not the same I do today, because the technology just it skyrockets. You need to teach yourself new things all the time. It's not like you take one computer degree, science degree, and then you're just done. And it's like, well, I can do whatever. No, you need to keep on learning every single day.
Because 10 years ago, there wasn't nearly as much. It was probably more on-prem and less in the cloud. And now it's probably flipping.
Yeah. So main big differences is like, it was like on-prem, but also the systems we made, it was like this monolith, one big program. And nowadays you do it distributed. So that means it's like smaller modules or microservices. Some have like, so small services. So it is easier to maintain these small services in one sense, because when something goes wrong with it, it's easier to understand it all because it's a smaller code base. While
Right.
when you had this one big thing, it crashes and it's, the mistake is somewhere inside this big block comparing to this microservice, right? What people often forget is, yeah, it is easier, but now you need to have more monitoring. You need to have, all kind of debugging messages. You need to have metrics to measure it, to see if everything is performing. So what you need nowadays, which you didn't need 10 years ago, are these that are called SREs, software reliability engineers, right? Those that set up the systems, do all the metrics, and do all that kind of magic. They are so important today, and that's amazing what they can do. The second thing you probably don't think about is actually it takes more resources to have all these microservices, because then you need a container for each container for each service, right? So you kind of need to find the sweet spot where there are not too many tiny services, but they are in some kind of reasonable size where it's still easy to maintain them. So yeah.
And Rune?
Rune.
Rune. And Rune, how did you, what brought you to start your Python content, your Python courses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I ask myself about that too. So Corona happened, and I started working from home immediately. Back at that point, I was actually a manager for some big data backend, mainly backend and architecture team. So I was taking, care of the big scale things, and I'm kind of like missing programming. So the truth is that the reason I started was because I wanted to start learning Python again. So that's actually also the name, Learn Python with Rune, because I'm learning along with you at the time. I do have all the computational background and all that, but you have to refresh it when you haven't programmed professionally for many years. Right. So that was actually the starting point. So the starting point was that actually I made this blog here, and I started with one simple course about data structures, and it's something I really enjoy. These kind of things, and the feedback was, it was amazing. The people that started that course was like, wow, that's really amazing. It's kind of a short course, but it was just like, trial, because I had no idea about teaching. Actually, I had never been teaching online before, so it's just like, how do you get started? I don't know. I try and see what the reaction is, and then you get feedback, you get better. I started another one and another one and another one, and I continued that for some time. So that's how I started, is because I wanted to program again. And then I started as a freelance consultant working for companies that need big data experts writing code in Python. So that's how I started. It was actually to make a career change.
Wow, that's awesome. And how have people been learning with you? Have many people been learning with you as well, or has it just been you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes you don't know, right? But yeah. On Udemy, it's around 30,000 people now.
Wow. And you just started that. How did you scale up so fast? That's amazing.
I don't know. Sometimes something works and sometimes doesn't. What happened recently is I'm actually going to go away from Udemy platform, because they changed kind of the payments, how they calculate how much you get paid, and it kind of halved what I get per month. So it's just like, okay, I'm going to start my own platform on the side. So that's the next big step here. But that said, I don't regret it, because I learned so much and I got connected with so many people. Most people, it's just like, they have a tiny problem, they write me and I solve it. But some people, they actually, we get along. I have some people that I'm communicating with since I started almost. It's kind of funny, and they kind of help me supporting. It's fine.
So it's not just you supporting them learning, it's them. You're also getting a lot out of it in
Yeah,
return.
because when you start something and you don't, I mean, I'm not really a social media expert, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not really, any of these things. I just do things. I like to create stuff, like I say. So you get feedback from them helping me. You could do this better, or you could add this to it, and so on, like that. So yeah, they're helping me because, I mean, I just like to do it. But what I don't really have is like the patience to become a social media expert and all that kind of stuff. I just create stuff and put it out there, and that's, don't really care if it's good, if it's what people want, but I get feedback and then you adjust to it. I'm not really doing the research myself. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, you have to do it very iteratively.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of the agile way to do things, right? You put
yeah.
something out, you get feedback, you modify your next version and my next version. Yeah, I think that's how I like to work. That's how you work with programming, right? Because you can do all the research before, but sometimes you still gets wrong. Your
Mhm.
analysis are wrong. So just do it, get feedback, do it better next time. And that's what I did.
And you mentioned that one of the reasons that you got into creating this channel is consulting was going really well, but you wanted to scale the amount of people you could help.
Oh
So
yeah.
I thought that was an interesting move from
Yeah.
consulting to this channel.
Yeah. So let me just explain that aspect. It's like, so I've been working with big data backends, right? So I've been working with a lot of people that are data analysts or data scientists or
Hmm.
whatever you call them, right? They have many names. What's often common for these people is they have extreme good domain knowledge. They know a lot of things about the domain, but often they have self-taught themselves the programming skills they need, right? So it's not like they're not experts at it, right? So I was helping a lot of people already, and I've realized I really enjoy helping people, and I mean, the gratitude you kind of get from helping people, it's
Hmm.
like it makes me grow. It's like making people happy. It's like, whoa, I just sometimes it's like takes 5 minutes for me and it just saves them hours and they're so grateful and just like it's amazing feeling. So what I was thinking about also while creating all these things is like, how can I make this scale? How can I help people at scale so I can help more people at the same time? So yeah, that was also kind of a motive. So a bit history about me. I think it's around 10 years back, maybe.
Uh-huh.
I had also a blog back then, but I closed it. And that's because I made some mistakes. Back then, I was all into Android programming
Uh-huh.
and I loved it. And it was pretty in the starting phases. There are not so many things back then. So I had this blog and I put all these tutorials on the things I was doing there. And people asked me for help, right? But suddenly, and I want to help people. That's the problem with me. I want really to help people. But when suddenly hundreds of people start asking you for specific help, and I felt like I was solving their working problem and not, so it's more like people, they needed to do a solution for some Android app, and I was more like solving that problem. It became draining for me. It's like, so I stopped the blog. So I also had that in my back head. It needs to scale, but it needs to scale in a way where it doesn't drain me from energy, because me as a person,
Oh, right.
I just want to help people, and I need to put some boundaries so that doesn't happen again. So I also have
So
like, yeah,
that's kind of where the consulting comes into play, where it's like you have you're teaching people Python, but then some people need a little extra help because they're trying to build something, and then you just say like, I have a consultancy for that, so a clear boundary. And then if you're helping someone in your consultancy, you can always send them, like, if they ask you a question, you'd be like, well, I actually have a video on this, and then you can just hand it over.
yeah.
Do you do that a lot?
Not so much yet, but it will probably
Uh-huh.
come. My consulting clients are big companies right now, so it's
Oh,
not so
okay,
much a
gotcha.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it could be. There are people asking me if I do one-on-one teaching, but I have helped some people. But honestly, I mean, it doesn't really scale for me because,
Right.
yeah, most people that need help are, yeah, they don't have the pay that needs to be paid to make it scale for me, at least.
And what are you where are you trying to take this learn with Learn Python with Rune.org.
Sorry, what?
Where are you trying to take the site? Like, what are you trying to do with it?
Oh yeah, so it's a journey, right? So when I started it back, I think it was in May. Was it May 19? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
No, May 20 it must be, because it was in Corona, right? It was 20, the Corona started. Yeah. Okay. So back then it was just more about, publishing a lot of small tutorials to help myself refresh my programming skills. And it got a lot of traction, quite mainly through Twitter, actually, in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so my next move here is to take it to have some free online courses. Right now I have like this general Learn Python from scratch, 8 hours with videos on YouTube. So that's one piece. And I have two more like on more financial data science things that I also enjoy a lot. So the next thing I'm working on right now is to have more like a machine learning course also for free.
Uh-huh.
So I want to provide more structured courses for free for everybody to enjoy, just for free. And so that's a side there. And the second step is, which I'm going to start in the beginning of next year, it is to make paid courses from my own platform, not from Udemy anymore. Because so that's the next piece I want to build in the next year.
I see. And yeah, like I'm looking at these videos that you've made, and they're highly edited. Like it looks like you put. I was kind of expecting you to just like be basically explaining stuff, but it's very edited. So you're basically like a pro video editor as well. That's amazing.
Not really. I just play around with it. I enjoy those things too. I mean, it's just I use Final Cut Pro and I just play around and figure it out.
Yeah, I'm noticing that you do something that I really appreciate when it comes to tutorials is you use the spotlight feature where like, sometimes when people do tutorials, they have a mouse that just moves around and the mouse is really small and you're like, what are they pointing at? Because they're talking about something specific, but you do this thing where you kind of like darken everything except for the area that you're supposed to be paying attention to. So I really like those little details.
But again, these things were my students helping me to improve all these things, because in the beginning I didn't do anything. I was using, for instance, the font was way too small on the videos, and there's so many mistakes. But people enjoyed it and they helped me, and so that's where I think this agile thing comes into play, right? You just do something and you get feedback, you do it better, and you get more feedback and you do it better. So I appreciate all the people helping me. Thank you.
That's awesome. And it's really cool how you break it down also with the timestamps. We do that on our episodes. So was it a hard learning curve to figure out how to publish yourself like that?
So publish myself like that.
I mean so that was all learned like very iteratively, just getting feedback and
yeah, it was. And actually, one thing that might surprise you is when I published my first courses, I didn't even watch any other courses. I just did it like I thought it should be presented, and then I just got feedback iteratively like that. And it's from feedback from students that helped me to shape my style, actually.
And then what are you doing differently that people are liking? Because you've grown your following pretty fast. So I'm just curious, like, what are you doing right?
That's a really, really good question. I think it is, if I do something right, I mean, I don't know. It is to listen to what people are saying, using that, and in the next version, presenting that. I mean, the problem is often my feedback loop is too slow right now, because I make a lot of recordings, and then, I mean, the last course, this Learn Python I had on Facebook, not on YouTube, I did all the recording together over 3 days, and I published it over, I don't know, 3 months. So I get a lot of feedback, which I can at first utilize now when we're at the end of it. So, and also, I guess I try to help people when they ask questions, but I only want to help them when I can help other people at the same time, right? So if people write individually to me to specific problems, most of the time I do not help because it doesn't scale. But if people ask a specific question related to the content that they're asking on, then I help, and they ask it publicly, then I help because then it helps. I can help other people at scale, right?
Mm-hmm. And what is one of the hardest things about learning programming in general?
That is a very good question. I think people's expectations are a bit wrong, a bit off when they start programming. It's like, okay, in America, you probably only learn English, right?
Yes.
As a language, but we foreigners, we learn, for instance, English as a language to speak. Just keep with me here. When you learn to speak a different language, the first thing you realize is understanding it is quite easy. So you start to understand English, but speaking it is very difficult because you cannot express yourself. You don't feel you can express the things you want to do. And that's the same with programming. Learning to read code is quite easy. So when people are sitting trying to solve things and they fail, and then they see the solution, they're just like, wow, I understand that. Why couldn't I think of that? It's exactly the same thing. Learning to read code and understand why it solves a problem is easy, but writing code, creating code that works is difficult. It takes, some of it is like theory and some is experience also. So does that make a picture of it?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, yeah, I just remember when I was learning how to code, you just learn how the order in which you read things and you can follow things step by step. But then as soon as I start coming down, start sitting in front of the keyboard, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to follow a syntax. What's the syntax? And then I have to Google everything. And then it's just like, it becomes very difficult. Yeah.
Exactly. When you go blank, you understand the problem you want to solve and you cannot express it in code. And when you see the solution, it's just like, why? It makes sense. I understand that. Why couldn't I express it, right? And that frustrates a lot of people. So I think that part is a difficulty for many people, expectations. Another difficulty I hear people have is like, they are not structured about what they want to learn. So many people reach out to me and say, I want to learn Python. What does it take? Well, first of all, Python can do a lot of things. Do you want to be a backend developer like I am, or do you want to be a data scientist? Because there's a big difference on what you need of skills, right? So my first advice is often figure out what problems you want to solve with Python. What is it you want to do with Python, right? Because it can do a lot of things. And what happens when you're not thinking about it is you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's unstructured and it's very different. It's not the same thing. Python is not just Python. Python for data scientists, you barely need to learn how to program. You just need to learn some libraries and some statistics and that kind of stuff. You don't need that much programming, actually.
It's kind of like picking up it's like someone saying, I want to learn a language, and then you hand them a dictionary and you're like, memorize all the words. And then they memorize all the words and they're like, okay, I know everything, but I just know pieces. I don't know how to string it together.
Yeah. And what happens when everything is free online, actually. So you can get everything for free online, right? So you have this dictionary, as you say, right? And what people do is they look on page 60 and they read a few things there. Then they look at page 285 and they read a bit there. And then they look at page 10 and read a bit there. It becomes unstructured. So you have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That's one of the issues. Another issue is you read a little bit from this guy, and then you read from this guy, and then this guy, and you get different styles of programming. What people don't understand before they start, it is you have different styles, and it can be very different. It's like people speak also in different ways and express themselves in different ways. The same with programming. I've been in programming for my entire life. So what's funny when you work with people closely, when you see some code you don't know which you don't know who wrote, you can actually see that on the style of coding. Oh, this must be this guy because he always does this. So it's actually way more personal than most people think. Most people think that code is just like math. It's just like one formula. No, it's not. It's very expressive. It's very creative. That surprises a lot of people, actually.
So then it gets confusing when they start learning from different styles.
Yeah, exactly. So my advice is like, first, figure out what do you want to do with Python. The thing before that, get realistic expectations, right? Because it takes longer time to learn to write code than read code, right? And then it was like, figure out what you want to do, and then find one source you want to follow to learn programming, and stick to that until you do the basics. Because it's going to be too confusing, do a little here and a little here. And most people get frustrated. I talk with people and say, I started so many times and I failed all of the time. Yes, you need structure. That is what people pay for, structure.
I see. So that's interesting. I noticed in your video courses, you have 3 courses on the free video course section. It's Learn Python, Python for Beginners, Financial Analysis with Python, Pandas, and then you have Python for Finance, Risk and Return. So it seems like you do, probably a lot of people look for the general, let's learn Python. But what you're saying is it's very useful when you use these focused courses because you're learning an application that you can practice daily instead of just, I'm going to do random stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I often think about how I learned to program, and I actually think it was easier back then because there was no internet available for me. So all I had was this one single book about programming, and that was all I had, right? It was probably a horrible book, but it was the only thing I had. So there's no question about if I should find something else. Most people, we are starting to living in a world where we want quick fixes and quick things fast, right? But it takes time, right? And stay focused on one way to do it until you master that before you move to the next one. That is, I think that's the best advice you can take. Stay focused.
Wow, that's fascinating. So for seeing people move through your course, what kind of things do you learn in each of these courses? Like financial analysis with Python, that one looks very interesting. But I'm actually mainly very interested in Python for Finance, Risk and Return. So what's like a takeaway that I would get from after I take that one?
So these so the risk and return is focused on how do you understand risk and return how can you do all the calculations in order to see what risk and return is. That's often the big thing you think about when you do investing. It is like there's a risk and there's a return, and you need to find the balance between them, right? So how can you do all these calculations easily with Python? So I think the big gift is back in the days what triggered me often is back in the days you would get information about investing from books, right? And a book would have some charts and stuff like that will kind of like convey you what they're saying is true, right? So if you follow this pattern, you can see it grows like this and blah, 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 whatever, right? So what we can do nowadays is you can take your Python with your pandas data frames and read all the data and redo the same calculations. And what you realize is, yes, they are not lying in the book. But if you move the time frame or you do some changes, then it doesn't work anymore. Because many times they find some optimal strategy that works in a specific time frame, specific historic time frame. But if you move it to present day or something, it doesn't work. So that's kind of what triggered me to do all these things. It's like, well, I want to understand what's behind it. And I actually also have an ebook about back testing of strategies on my webpage. There's an ebook about back testing. It also goes through, it actually follows along one book I read. And I was doing all the calculations on these things. And it's like, yeah, it's true what it says. But if you look at it in different time frames, it doesn't work.
I'm really into crypto, and one of my favorite what's it called? Cryptocurrencies. This one called Nano. But ever since getting into it, I've bought a lot of cryptocurrencies, and now I've become more interested in investing and kind of like coming up with strategies and stuff like that. So yeah, this definitely looks fascinating for that. But I haven't actually played around with doing an intelligent strategy. So
No.
that seems kind of fascinating.
Yeah, because I would say 80% of all books, yes, it is true what it says, but if you just move it a bit around, you can see it's not valid for everybody. So I think this is the main takeaway from these courses, is teaching you to check all the things you're reading. Is it really true or not, right? And if you're really interested in learning more about investing, I mean, I actually have a big course on Udemy, which is actually looking for long-term investing, right? So how do you do the real deep analysis, more like Warren Buffett-like strategies? I know some people critique him, but actually the things he's writing, it's amazing. So following along his line of making financial analysis is what that focuses on, and will teach you how to find companies and find the value that they should actually cost, and only buy those stocks that are having a value to the what's called the intrinsic value. You often call it the intrinsic value instead. And then so basically it teaches you how at scale, how to calculate intrinsic values for multiple companies simultaneously. And then you can find, are there any current prices that are below the intrinsic value, and find them as good investments.
And then you learn how to build that algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you do. I take you through all the way, and also a bit about technical analysis in the end, how to time it, and have some warning lamps, when to get out if it gets too reddish.
Wow, that's fascinating. So one thing that I want to get is the behind this. I was thinking about questions to ask you, and one of the ones that I was thinking about is give us a behind the scenes look at the statistics behind which courses are people using, or what are the numbers behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What surprised me the most is so there are like two ways to look at the numbers, because apparently some courses seem to be very popular in some regions. And for instance, I have this crypto course on Udemy, and it has quite a lot of students, but honestly, the pay is less than some of the other courses, because I guess Udemy sells the courses cheaper in these regions to fit their living standards than some other courses. So actually the highest paying is this financial things, and that pays pretty high on average per student. So there's a big difference on the average income per student on Udemy. That said, also what happened recently, I think I mentioned it, it's so Udemy changed the way that they do calculate the payment. So actually it's kind of halved what I get on average per month recently. So it's just that was a few months before summer they changed that, and just okay, that's also why I decided to create my own independent platform to teach from instead. So yeah, so the highest revenue I get from the finance course, and I think that's the one, as far as I remember.
Are you going to be creating more content in finance in that area because of this, or what areas are you going to create more content for?
Yeah, that's also a good question, because to be honest with you, I'm not really good at doing all kind of research and social media things, right? I just take the feedback I get from people. That's actually what I do. I don't really have the patience. I sometimes think, and now I have to get really, really good at being a social media presence and have the personality that people want to follow. But I don't have it in me. I just like to create stuff. That's it. And so I'm kind of often getting feeling behind what, for instance, on my blog, what are the pages that people visit the most, right? So I kind of like that, and which one are they commented most on, right? And I'm trying to take that kind of feedback from people and what people are saying specifically to me. So So the next move on the blog will be an online course about machine learning. So we take a very project-oriented way. So we take from the most simple ones, where I take the student and introduce the concept step by step, and then building a project. So it's going to be, I'm going to teach some stuff. I'm going to show the simple way to do stuff. And then there's a project, and then I solve the project, and all the code will be available for the student as well. So they can follow it, follow along and do all the steps by themselves. It's going to be like that. And it's going to go all the way to the more advanced stuff, like neural networks, which are really, really popular. So it's going to be awesome.
Well, that's awesome. I guess on our AI podcast, we've come full circle. So now you're teaching an AI course. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's going to be free. Remember that.
And if people want to find this course, they reach you at learnpythonwithrune.org, right?
Yeah, that's a starting point. Yeah, that's a good starting point. It will be there.
Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to kind of go over?
Oh, that's always a really exciting question. Yeah. So I can't think of anything right now, but it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rune, for being on our show. Did I pronounce it right?
Almost.
I'll get it.
So I can actually mention what my name means. So you probably know the old Vikings from the Nordic countries. Maybe not, but there's some. 1,000 years ago, there were these Vikings in the Nordic countries, including Denmark. Back then, it was not Denmark. It was just like a lot of Vikings running around crazy. And they had these stones where they wrote letters on, and those letters are called runes. So it's that my name. So my name means wisdom and secrecy, actually. Because runes, it's knowledge, because that was the way they could write. They could write it on these stones. So that was the knowledge, right? And the secrecy is there were only a few people that could actually read it. So that's like the story behind my name. Yeah, exactly. Really amazing. Awesome. Yeah. Good.
Well, it was great having you on your show. And yeah, I cannot wait to start exploring your course and learning Python myself using your courses. That'll be exciting.